Club is pleased and proud to welcome leading figures and organizations to this conference, which is being held alongside the Human Rights Council session. In collaboration with Emirates Detainees Advocacy Center, CAP Freedom of Conscience, MENA Rights Group, and the Egyptian Human Rights Forum, we invite you to a conference with Falah Sayed, hello Faya, Human Rights Officer and MENA Rights Group, Hamad Al-Shamsi, Executive Director of the Emirates Detainees Advocacy Center. Hamad Al-Shamsi is online. Hello, good afternoon. Hamad.
Good afternoon.
Hello. Ahmed Al-Nuaimi, exiled member of the UAE 94 trial. He's not here. Yes.
The plane's delayed. He'll be coming shortly.
Okay, fine. Moataz El-Fegiery, co-founder and president of the Egyptian Human Rights Forum. He's online too. Good afternoon. Hello.
Hello, good afternoon.
And finally, Matthew Hedges, a British academic specialized in security studies. Welcome everybody here in this place, Geneva Press Club. And now the conference will be moderated by James Lynch. Welcome, James. And I give you now the floor. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Geraldine, and thank you to the Geneva Press Club. Hi, I'm James Lynch from First Square, and I'm really pleased to be here for this, important discussion. And I think it's a very prescient one. The UAE has been in a human rights crisis for nearly 15 years. Ever since 2011 was really when the crisis deepened. What we saw in 2011 was the mild attempts of some of the country's intellectuals to peacefully and politely seek reforms. This is what sparked this decade and a half of deep repression. I remember when I visited the country in 2014, I was really struck by the fear levels in the UAE among both citizens and foreign nationals. They didn't want to speak for fear of what that could mean for them. That was way in excess of many of the other countries in the region, which were then really in active crackdowns. Since 2014, things have only got worse. And I think for me, perhaps the most symbolic moment in recent years was during COP28, the climate talks in Dubai in 2023. The eyes of the world were on the UAE and its authoritarian system. People were calling for the release of political prisoners like Ahmed Mansour. How did the UAE system respond? By holding a new mass trial for people who were mostly already all in prison for supposed crimes that they'd committed in 2010 that they had already been tried for. There was pretty much silence from the international community around those trials, that trial, and that remains the situation until now. I think you're not seeing the kind of mass clamor that you might see when it comes to other countries if they were to be behaving in the same way and to start a trial like that in the middle of an international conference in their country. So I'm really looking forward to exploring how these systems of repressions operate and how the UAE is able to operate with this sort of level of impunity on the international level. And it's fantastic to have such a brilliant panel to do that with today. I wanted to briefly read out a short set of remarks from Thierry, the president of CAP Freedom of Conscience, who's sort of supported us with this event but can't be here. I'll just read that out before we move to comments from our panel. Thierry writes, about a year ago, CAP Freedom of Conscience hosted a side event at the UN to shed light on the crisis of arbitrary detention in the UAE following mass trials and to examine the country's persistent failure to comply with international standards. It's deeply troubling that a year on, the situation remains unchanged. Information about the conduct of domestic proceedings is still limited. As Human Rights Watch confirmed in July 2025, convictions have been upheld in mass trials that imposed unfair sentences on human rights defenders and political dissidents. Alarmingly, repression also extends to non-UAE citizens living abroad, relying on state cooperation to secure the extradition of dissidents to the UAE. This month, during the 60th regular session of the UN Human Rights Council, CAP Freedom of Conscience delivered an oral statement on behalf of those arbitrarily detained in the UAE. We urge the authorities to take immediate steps to comply with international law, including amending measures that violate the principles of legality and non-retroactivity and providing compensations and reparations to those unlawfully detained. Although I regret not being able to join you in person today, on behalf of CAP Freedom of Conscience, I'm pleased to co-sponsor this important discussion at the Geneva Press Club. We remain committed to continuing to raise awareness of these abuses within the UN system until meaningful change is achieved. So with that, what I'd like to do now is turn to our panel, each of whom are such incredible specialists. The first person I'm going to turn to is Hamad, who is online. Hamad, who leads the work of the Emirates Detainees Advocacy Center. Hamad, I wonder if you could start us off with giving us a brief introduction or an overview to how mass trials and arbitrary detention operate in the UAE, and perhaps also why they operate.
Yeah, first of all, thank you, James, for having me, and I'm really glad to be here and to discuss this very important subject. And I wish I had the opportunity to be there with you in person, but unfortunately I couldn't make it this time. Hopefully next time I will be able to attend. Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, before I start, I would like to mention that I'm really feeling disappointed that we have been speaking about story for 13 years. And this story started 13 years ago. And we have been speaking about it in many different events, like in UN events like UPR. We're speaking about it in COP28, inside event like this. But nothing has been changed. We have spoken to many politicians around the world, NGOs, but nothing has been changed positively. In fact, the situation has gotten worse, not gotten better. So, I mean, as you mentioned just minutes ago, these prisoners of conscience were supposed to be released almost more than 3 years ago. But instead of releasing them, the UAE government decided to sentence them one more time, but this time for 25 years ago. So we expect that these prisoners of conscience to be released in 25 years from now. I mean, they have been already in jail for 13 years, and they will be, I mean, they will serve more than 20 years in the prison. When we see these events, we imagine, or we can imagine, that the UAE government has a political decision that these people will not be released at all until, God forbid, until they die. They will keep them in prison until they die, and they will not release them, because this is what we have been seeing for a long period of time. Regardless, the effort that has been done to make awareness, to shed light on this situation, to shed light on the prisoners of conscience, the UAE government is not releasing them. Why, as you just asked, I mean, why these prisoners of conscience have been in jail for this long time? I believe that the beliefs of these prisoners of conscience is in contradict with the UAE government agenda. The UAE government agenda is, contradicting human rights around the world. They have been involved in war of Sudan. They have been involved in war in Yemen. They have been involved in, they supporting Israel in a way or other. They are supporting the Egyptian regime. So the UAE government decided to silence people inside the UAE by punishing these kind of people. So people cannot say no. no to the UAE government, so the UAE can proceed with their agenda. To be honest with you, when I go back and think about these prisoners of conscience, I feel like these prisoners of conscience, we need them to be released, not because they have the right to be released, but also because we need them. We need, as a UAE society, as a people in the region, maybe even in the world, we need these people to be released because they will have a very positive role in the UAE. In the region. I can imagine, to be honest with you, I can imagine to see Ahmed Mansour going to Gaza with the activists just last night, calling for the release, calling for the break of the siege against Gaza. I can imagine Ahmed Mansour calling for the genocide that's going on inside Gaza to be stopped. I can imagine Mohammed Rukn protesting against the war in Sudan. I can imagine Hamad al-Mansouri protesting the war, against the war in Yemen. So these people inside the prison, we need them to be released, not because, as I mentioned, not because we feel like they have the right to be released, their family have the right to have their family back at home, but also for the region, for our societies, and to have maybe a safer, better society and communities around the world. And you know when I think also about the situation, these people has been in the prison for almost now 13 years. The situation in the prison is very, very bad. I mean, I think everyone already know how bad the situation is inside the UAE prisons, and about we know the regimes in the Middle East. But when I think about it, I think, okay, why we do not have a positive result? Why these people are still in the prison, even though of the effort that has been done around the world? I think because we do not have an effective tools. The government of UAE is being rewarded, not being punished. They have been elected to be a UN Human Rights Council. Can you imagine? They have been rewarded with COP28. They have been rewarded of hosting a lot of events inside the UAE. Nevertheless, that the situation of human rights is very, none between the societies and between the governments. I believe this situation happening because we as human rights community, we as UN rapporteurs and working groups, we do not have an effective tools. And I think we need to discuss this very deeply. Why we do not have an effective tools? Having a report, publishing a report is not an effective tools. Speaking about this between governments, with a politician, with human rights NGOs is not an effective tools anymore, because the UAE has a lot of money and they whitewash their violations with their money. So I imagine that we need to have, like, as human rights communities, we need to discuss this very deeply. We need to have a tools that being effective. Not only, we do not need only to spend efforts. We need to have a tools that have an effective role, that have a positive role. For example, like when I can imagine if the UN rapporteurs, the working groups has a veto right, I think we will have a better result. For example, if UAE government has been elected for UN Human Rights Council member, being a member in Human Rights Council, any rapporteurs can come and he can say, no, I veto this because I have concerns about my mandate. So I need to address these concerns before I remove the veto. So if these kind of vetoes has been awarded to these rapporteurs, to the working groups, I think we will have a better result, not only for the UAE, but also like for the human rights situation in general. I think I will stop here. Maybe if there is a certain questions, I can just answer it, James. Thank you.
Thank you, Hamad. That was a fantastic introduction, and I found it really powerful when you spoke about the sort of alternative pathway where the prisoners of conscience were not in prison, unable to even, in many cases, see their families. but were able to be participating in political debate in the UAE and in the region, and how different things could potentially look. Thank you. I want to turn to Falah Sayed from MENA Rights Group now. Falah, I wonder, Hamad mentioned the UAE in relation to the UN Human Rights Council and the working groups. I wonder if you could give some reflections from your work here in Geneva. How does the UAE interact with the UN? How do the member states engage with the human rights issues in the UAE? How does the UAE respond to people who criticize it, you know, and are there reprisals? Maybe you can give some reflections on those issues.
Of course, and thank you so much, and thank you for being with us and inviting us to speak about these important issues. So for those who do not know us, at MENA Rights Group, we kind of adopt a holistic approach to human rights advocacy, meaning that we work both on individual and structural level to document individual human rights violations, but also identify, you know, root causes and patterns of violations. And as you said, James, our engagement with the UN has been truly central to this work. And over the past decade, we've basically submitted numerous communications to UN special rapporteurs, contributed to the UN Secretary General's annual reports on reprisals, and brought cases before the UN Working Group on Arbitrary Detention, including, you know, participating also in the UN in the Universal Periodic Review, but that was a while back. But you know, because of this, I will structure it in a way that I will go over some findings that we had over the past few years following these types of engagements. And first of all, I'd like to start with the UN Secretary General's report on reprisals, which came out last week, if I'm not mistaken. And basically, the UN Assistant Secretary General for Human Rights presented the annual report on intimidation and reprisals against those who are cooperating with the UN. This report reveals that more than 6 out of 10 cases of reprisals in the MENA region are linked to counterterrorism or security measures, which is why we're seeing that, you know, governments are basically weaponizing counterterrorism legislation, not to protect their citizens from genuine threats, but to silence human rights defenders, and criminalize cooperation with the United Nations and crush any form of dissent. And the United Arab Emirates is featured prominently in this report, and for good reason. The report, you know, provides updates on 3 emblematic cases, which is connected to the mass trial of 84 individuals, known as the UAE 84 trial. I can give a quick overview a bit later about this mass trial. But I would like to share with you, you know, the stories of 3 individuals who are featured in this report. First of all is Ahmed Mansour, a prominent human rights defender. Hamad just mentioned him. He's appeared in the UN report on reprisals since 2014. He was arrested in March 2017 after years of cooperation with the UN, you know, including participation in the UAE's Universal Periodic Review. He was initially sentenced to 10 years in prison for his human rights activities and then retried in the UAE 84 trial and sentenced to 15 years, if I'm not mistaken. And his sentence was upheld, as was the others. Another person who was featured in the reprisals report is Mohammed Al-Mansouri, who is another human rights defender who also cooperated with the UN mechanisms. He was also retried in the UAE 84 case and sentenced to life imprisonment in July 2024. And another person is also Ahmed Ali Mekkawi, who actually has remained without any family contact since 2021, which, you know, is raising concerns about his isolation, about his well-being. We consider that he is forcibly disappeared, and this is putting him at risk of being exposed to torture. And maybe just very quickly a few words about the UAE 84 trial and some background and what has the UN said about it. The UN 84 trial began in December 2023 while the UAE was hosting COP28, as you said, James, and you know, it was a time where, you know, the UAE was trying to project an image of openness to the world, but at the same time, and in a complete media blackout, I would say, there was this mass trial happening. At least 84 defendants, many of whom had already served prison sentences for peaceful activism, were charged with forming a terrorist organization. Many had already been convicted in 2013 in a grossly unfair trial, which is the trial of the UAE 94. And we've seen that on July 10, 2024, the Abu Dhabi Federal Court convicted at least 44 defendants with sentences ranging from 15 years to life imprisonment. And I think at least 40 have received life sentences. You know, the trial was fundamentally unfair from start to finish. We've documented many cases. Defendants and their lawyers were denied access to case files. Lawyers could only view documents on a screen in a secure room, forbidden from taking photographs or making copies. The judge, you know, openly directed witnesses' testimony, putting words in their mouth, basically. Many defendants were held in incommunicado detention for nearly a year. They described torture, forced nudity, physical assault, and denial of medical care. And one important thing to keep in mind is that these trials were also shrouded in secrecy, with authorities, you know, restricting family members' access to hearings. This trial has been the object of a communication by the UN special procedures, and they have found that there has been, you know, big violations of international law. If I may finish, I don't know if I have a few minutes left, but there's also a very important tool that we've also documented, aside from, you know, imprisonment and enforced disappearance, but it is that of citizenship stripping. And, you know, this practice is mainly used against those who are the object of the UAE 94 trial and the UAE 84 trials. We've seen that many UAE 94 members had their citizenship revoked while they were imprisoned. In March, one example is that in March 2016, 3 children of Mohammed Al-Siddiq were summoned to the migration department and told that their citizenship had been revoked by decree, although the authorities refused to give a copy of this decree. And the UAE government basically justified this by stating that since, you know, the children's citizenship was granted through affiliation with their father, it lapsed when it was revoked. So they also revoked the children, the family members and the person concerned. But beyond revocation, the UAE authorities also employ another method to quash dissent, which is withholding the renewal of individuals' identity documents. So it's not official revocation, it's just withholding the renewal of identity documents. But this places them at increased risk of statelessness. And this practice has actually been widely used since 2011, especially against individuals that include UAE 94 members. And also, just to finish on that note, is that this tool and this practice has been also documented by the UN. We've also done a submission to the UN about this. And there is a communication by UN special rapporteurs dated from April 2025, so it's quite recent, which underscores the urgency of addressing this human rights violations. I'm going to end on this because I think I went over time, so that's it.
That was really incredibly rich overview. Thank you, Falah. I mean, there's so much to pick up there. And by the way, we will have some time for questions after the sort of initial presentations. And for people watching online, please do sort of submit questions through the online system. I was particularly struck, Falah, by what you ended with there, which was these much more, probably less well-known tools of repression, these tools of control, like this control of citizenship documents, which can have this really pernicious impact on people's lives, on people's families' lives. That probably is not as well known as the trials themselves and the detention. Thank you. So I'm going to turn to Moataz now. Moataz from the Egyptian Human Rights Forum. And I wanted to ask you, Moataz, we've spoken about, I think, this primarily as an issue that affects Emirati nationals and people arrested in the UAE. But I wondered if you could talk about the kind of international, transnational nature of arbitrary detention and trials and unfair trials in the UAE. Transnational repression is getting a lot of attention at the moment, and rightly so. And I wonder if you could explain a little about how this works in practice with the UAE and maybe give us some examples.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me. United Arab Emirates continue to be a puzzle when it comes to the work of international and regional human rights organizations in the Middle East and North Africa. Also, over the last few years, given the changing geopolitics in the region, United Arab Emirates has become a major power in the Middle East and North Africa, and it is very influential when it comes to domestic politics in countries such as Egypt, Sudan, Tunisia, Syria, and the fact that we have been confronted with that United Arab Emirates is resilient to international advocacy work, very resilient to international advocacy work. One can achieve some minor progress. However, it has been very difficult to pressure United Arab Emirates to release prisoners of conscience. I spent 7 years working for Frontline Defenders. I was managing the Middle East and North Africa. And since 2011, 2012, United Arab Emirates has become much more powerful when it comes to human rights work. And its impact go beyond Emirati human rights defenders. We are now talking about the case of transnational repression and the worst model or the worst experience that we have seen recently is what happened to political activist and poet Abdulrahman Yusuf Al-Qaradawi, who was detained in Lebanon early this year, extradited to United Arab Emirates very quickly without due process of law, and he continued to be under forced disappearance until now. He managed to see his family just twice, very short period of time because of the international pressure, but he continued to be in forced disappearance. So his forced disappearance was interrupted just twice, but we are not aware where is he jailed and what are the charges against him. There are other examples actually that happened for Arab and foreign activists who tried and detained in United Arab Emirates. The new thing or the new element in Abdulrahman Yusuf Al-Qaradawi case that he was extradited from another country. He has a Turkish nationality, Egyptian Turkish nationality. United Arab Emirates is another state party which pressured Lebanon to receive him. And this also indicates how cooperation between Arab government in the region is very dangerous for human rights defenders. It's very risky for human rights defenders. But I can remind the audience of the case of Jordanian journalist Thierry al-Najjar. Maybe some of us forgot what happened to him, but Thierry al-Najjar, he tweeted or posted, I think posted on Facebook, something about United Arab Emirates. And in a visit to Abu Dhabi, he was arrested, detained, tried in United Arab Emirates and jailed for 4 years in the past. And when he returned back to Jordan, he just few months he died because of the ill treatment and the poor detention conditions that he suffered from when he was in United Arab Emirates. So there are many cases, even for European and Western activists. Sometimes they can be also arrested in United Arab Emirates. Maybe international pressure can release them, but there are cases also for torture against Western citizens in United Arab Emirates, which all of that indicates the strength of the country politically, financially. It has lobbying, strong lobbying circles in Europe and in the United States. And this lobbying support has increased over the last few years. It has been very difficult to achieve progress in these cases. Even Emirati detainees themselves, since 2011, their detention continued. New cases have been fabricated and they continued in jail. The UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights, Ms. Mary Lawler, she put United Arab Emirates as a priority in her work. But she herself, I mean, she made several urgent appeals, several calls to the Emirati authorities, and no response at all. I think in order to achieve progress, we need the support of the international community. We need the support of United States, we need the support of European government, we need the support of international media. And I know that this is not easy because of the close ties between United Arab Emirates and international community. But things cannot continue like that. And I'm here talking to Emirati authorities. If United Arab Emirates achieve reputation in economy, in tourism, in, as a place for employment and all of that, it doesn't really improve its image to continue this harsh repression of peaceful activists and human rights defenders. It will even be much more better for United Arab Emirates to show some kind of responsibility and good faith in treating people like Abdulrahman Yusuf, Ahmad Mansour, Mohammed Al-Rukn, and actually as a step for building confidence, to tell us where is Abdulrahman Yusuf, to tell us what are the charges against him, and to allow Abdulrahman Yusuf to access international community, to access human rights organization, and to access his lawyers, and to start a process, a legal process, because so far there is no legal process. We need to know what are the charges against him. And finally, a call for international community. This will have a chilling effect on human rights activists everywhere, because I know very well that posing criticism to United Arab Emirates is a red line. And some activists and journalists avoid actually posing any criticism to United Arab Emirates. So this will have chilling effect on freedom of expression, on independent journalism, on independent human rights activism. So we need support, we need solidarity from international organizations. Our event today is an important step, but we need to do more. We need to be resilient as well. If United Arab Emirates is resilient toward international pressure, we also need to show resilience and to continue our peaceful struggle in order to free and release prisoners of conscience in United Arab Emirates. Thank you.
Thank you, Moataz. I thought that was really interesting what you were saying about, in a way, making the kind of business case for the release of prisoners of conscience and compliance with international human rights law for the UAE. On top of those, the human rights norms, why is it in the UAE's interests to open up to a more tolerant way of dealing with different views? I think that's something maybe we can come back to in the discussion, because I think that's probably an important part of how we need to kind of move forward with this conversation to make these different arguments. You also touched on the issue of the kind of difficulty of garnering international focus and attention on these issues, and that's very, very relevant to I think what I'm going to ask Matt to touch on. I mean, I find it quite confusing, Matt, that the UAE doesn't get more international media blowback and it doesn't get more scrutiny from UN member states, from the what we term the international community. Has there been blowback for the kind of domestic violations, or also the UAE's activities in Yemen, Sudan, and others that Hamad mentioned?
Good morning, good afternoon. Thank you very much for coming and donating your time and listening to us. James, The UAE does have a broad, international, near comprehensive, positive reputation and image. This is the result of a well-crafted and sustained campaign of soft power influence, of leverage, and while this has been able to, over time, generate some of the desired results that Abu Dhabi wants, this has been, there has been some erosion of this reputation, at least in the last couple of years. The UAE's international strategy, its engagement is primarily built around two very simple pillars. The first is agreeing with what Falah said. It is the security domain. Under the leadership of Mohammed bin Zayed, Abu Dhabi has used the military and its security establishment to demonstrate that it is a strong, tolerant, modern state within a region of intolerant people. They self-orientalize and say, look how backward, look how uneducated everybody else is. We are the modern ones. They use this period to justify and secure weapon sales, arms sales, again, further increasing their engagement with Western partners, and also help in joint operations, from Afghanistan to Syria, Libya, Yemen, wherever there is a shared interest. This has, however, evolved and morphed over the past decade, and directly linked to the rise of Mohammed bin Zayed is the UAE's expansionism, and it's taken its own path, particularly in Libya, Sudan, Somalia, and Yemen. This is where some of the friction has started to occur. The UAE does still continue to deploy that specific funding, and in relation to the transnational repression aspect is the UAE's sustained donation and financial support to Interpol. Over several years, the UAE gave huge amounts of money to help sustain Interpol's operations, and this ended up with the president of Interpol being appointed, and he was the UAE's Inspector General within the Ministry of Interior, Major General Nasser Al-Raisi. This is just a slight demonstration of how the UAE has been able to successfully target and develop some of its influence, some of its array of resources to achieve the desired results. The chilling effect that has come from the UAE's leadership within Interpol is the legitimization of quite blatant acts of transnational repression. There have been several high-profile cases of nationals being picked up on a red notice and deported to a third country or a second country, and this has directly contributed to the breakdown in the international rule of law. Alongside the UAE's investments in the security realm, and what I believe is more important, are the UAE's investments, financial and commercial investments. In particular, they target strategic and critical infrastructure, both in Europe, in America, in the global south. This mirrors a strategy undertaken by Russia and Europe by investing in critical infrastructure, by ensuring that Germany has a supply of, say, cheap gas. They were able to secure Berlin's support, tacitly at least, for their own interests. The second that the Nord Stream pipelines, which is what they were called, were destroyed, Germany was able to take a more independent path. The UAE takes a very similar approach. Again, it shows we are modern, we are tolerant. They lead investments in renewable energy, in education, in gender equality. But ultimately, they are seeking to maximize the political value of these investments. Now, despite this, the UAE's subversive and harmful practices are well known internationally. The UAE has been accused of facilitating corrupt commercial practices, such as the 1MDB case. This involved the UAE Vice President Mansour bin Zayed. It is currently being investigated by the EU for violations of competitive legislation, and this is in regards to ADNOC's purchase of Germany's Covestro. The UAE is exposed to Russian intelligence operations within Europe, and particularly through the Austrian oil and gas company OMV. The UAE has also helped facilitate Russia evade sanctions. This is both through the UAE's commercial entities, but also by strengthening commercial trade and engagement with partners such as Belarus, Serbia, and so forth. Now, the UAE in recent years has started to target key and crucial sectors, specifically in the West, but this has directly resulted in the UK and US on several occasions stating that the UAE's interests are a direct and growing threat to national security. So while on the one hand, the UAE does have a positive and strong image, does have a good reputation in many areas, there is a growing tolerance and willingness to scrutinize what comes with the strings, what comes with this support, with the demand for unequivocal support. The danger is, as global economies slow and there's increased need of financial and economic support, that states are willing to overlook some practices. When a son of the former of the founder Sheikh Zayed, one of his sons, Isa bin Zayed, was filmed torturing a man surrounded by police in the desert, the courts acquitted him on the basis that he had a negative reaction to drugs. The fact that a son of the founder and ruler was able to torture someone on video and there weren't any reprisals for this. The fact that Mansour bin Zayed is directly linked to 1MDB and there are no repercussions. That was demonstrative of the leeway afforded to Abu Dhabi and the UAE. Its actions in Sudan, its increased confidence and willingness to undertake its own operations in Sudan, with Russia, with China, that is starting to raise serious questions about the level of support that at least Western states is willing to provide Abu Dhabi. The last point I'll just make is, while there is still quite an intense public relations and public diplomacy battle taking place, in many states in regards to the UAE, countries like my own, the UK, have witnessed and are seeing an increased number of asylum applications for Emirati nationals. The fact that Western states are approving this is a clear demonstration of the acknowledgement that there are comprehensive and widespread human rights abuses. The UK government may not come out and say it explicitly, but by approving such requests, they are. Thank you very much.
That was absolutely fascinating. So much in there. I agree with you. I've been really, I think it was very striking that we saw the UAE being unable to buy the Telegraph in the UK because the government actually changed the law to prevent it happening, or at least to buy it in the way it wanted, at least, that the Special Security Committee was set up to oversee the UAE's ownership of part of Vodafone. And the New York Times putting on the front page UAE involvement in the abuses of the Rapid Support Forces in Sudan. These are things we maybe wouldn't have seen a few years ago. So there is some sense of that kind of overreach as you reference. So we have one further panelist, but he is, I think, winging his way here from the airport. His flight was delayed. So while we hopefully wait for him to arrive and hear from him, we're going to take some questions. So I have some online questions. Meanwhile, if there's anyone in the room who wants to ask a question, let me know, indicate to me. So we have an online question. I think this really could be anybody on the panel to answer this. You all touched on this issue. Has anyone seen tangible impact, policy changes, legal reforms, or shifts in practice arising from UN reports or communications to the UAE? Now, Moataz kind of touched on this, that the Special Rapporteur has been pushing, but maybe not seeing results. But I wonder if we can take that in a bit more detail. I mean, Falah, perhaps we could ask you to kick off, and then we'll take other contributions.
It's hard to evaluate the success stories in terms of UN engagement. What is positive to see is that, you know, the pressure should keep being increased. We've seen that in the UPR, there has been a lot of recommendations, very positive recommendations that were made to the UAE. Some of them have been noted, some of them have been accepted. So obviously this just is an impulse for the UAE to, you know, amend their counterterrorism law, amend their state security apparatus, just make policy changes, and a reminder that they are under scrutiny of the international community. One, or not one, but, you know, an area of success stories, relative successes that we can see is when we file submission to the Working Group on Enforced Disappearance, we do see that the UAE authorities engage with these mechanisms. So they do give us information, sometimes not very detailed, but they do give us information about the whereabouts of the person. Sometimes they do give access to the person to visit their family, which does not yet reach, you know, international standards, but still we see that there is a back and forth that goes with the government. So I would evaluate this as a relative positive, a relative success story, but yeah, that's my take on it.
Would Hamad or Moataz online wish to comment on that or add anything?
Yeah, I can add a little bit on what Falah has said. I think, unfortunately, like when I evaluated on my side, I don't see any positive responses from the UAE government. It is in fact getting worse. Like as I mentioned in my speech, like the prisoners of conscience they were supposed to be released 3 years ago, and they were in prison beyond their sentences, and they were like being detained as arbitrary detention. So when we raised this problem to the UAE, UPR, many state delegates have mentioned the situation. And instead of releasing them, the UAE decided to sentence them one more time and keeping them in prison for 25 years extra. Most of them. So this is not like for me, it is not like a positive impact. They try to do something. They try to legalize their criminal acts. They try to legalize their violations. So in a way that when someone will speak to them again about why you keeping these prisoners of conscience inside prison, they will say they had been sentenced for 25 years ago. So this is according to a court, not to the being detained and like arbitrarily. As I mentioned, I still believe that we don't have an effective tools as a human rights community, as UN rapporteurs, as we can publish reports, we can raise awareness, we can shed light on the situations, but unfortunately, this will not have an impact unless we have really effective tools. I mean, I mentioned the veto things, but I'm not really sure if that something can happen, but I think if that happens, it will have a positive impact. The UAE, as Moataz mentioned, they are very resilient toward human rights, reports and stuff like that. But yeah, I think more can be done. The UAE is still being rewarded. Just, I think, 2 weeks from now, they will host very big event sponsored by Reuters. So this is something that we should not see while people being in prison.
Yes. May I add something?
Please, Moataz, yeah.
I would say let's also keep hope on something. International pressure made by human rights organization and UN expert, yes, did not lead to release of prisoners or settlement of cases. But we have to keep in mind also that the well-being of those prisoners is important. Without publishing information, without having urgent appeals shared by UN expert, we don't know what will happen for those prisoners. Abdurrahman Yusuf Qaradawi case himself is instructive in this regard, because he stayed for some time without any information about his whereabouts or without any contact with international community. But because of the pressure, because of the mobilization made by the Egyptian community, by United Nations expert, by international organization, we managed to secure 2 visits for the family. And at least we are sure that his well-being is fine in prison. This is very important, I think. I know that the ambition became very limited right now because we should seek the release of defenders, but we have also to keep in mind that those people under forced disappearance, they could even lose their life. So our duty by all of that pressure is to make sure that their well-being is maintained. The minimum standard of their well-being is maintained. Thank you.
Thank you all for that. And one thing I think I just take from your last comment, Moataz, on Abdurrahman Al-Qaradawi, is this point really, I'm consciously think about with the, I constantly think about when we talk about the UAE is the isolation of prisoners, of arbitrarily detained prisoners of conscience in the UAE really does stand out as a particularly bad example. Almost anywhere in the world, the lack of contact people have with the outside world. And so on to, I think we have a question in the room. I don't know whether we can get a mic. Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Maybe if you feel like it, maybe you can introduce yourself as well.
Yes, thank you very much. Michael Kambata here from the Gulf Center for Human Rights, and we've been working on issues with you over many years. Ahmed Mansour is actually one of our leading lights in our organization. I think one of the things that strikes me about the UAE is the difference between its very positive international relationship and its awful human rights record. And I think of all the states in the world, it has managed somehow to have the biggest divergence. People think of Dubai as a playground, they go on holiday there, but they don't really realize what the human rights situation is. Just as a small anecdote, I remember reading there were football fans who went to Qatar for the World Cup, but because they felt uncomfortable with Qatar's human rights record, they decided not to sleep there, but slept in the UAE instead, not perhaps realizing that the human rights record was even worse there. Now, given that the almost unlimited resources the UAE has had, it's not surprising they've managed to keep such a high such a high reputation. They're aided with all kinds of resources. But I'm just wondering if we could have a small outline of what are the elements that do hit their reputation. It's been mentioned that we don't have enough tools. But the UN it is what it is, and one can use the tools or not. But it seems that the UAE is willing to expend a lot of resources to maintain its reputation. So that seems to me a point of vulnerability. And I'm just wondering if maybe people could outline what have been some effective tools to affect reputation, whether in public or whether in advocacy with state leaders. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Really good points. And why don't we actually have a second question? Why don't we take two questions together? Yeah.
يعطيكم العافية. أنا بدي أحكي بالعربي وبطلب من في أحمد بترجم أو الأستاذة فلاح.
No pressure, no pressure.
أنا إلي يعني صديق وعدة أصدقاء ما معروفين، أو مثلا بالنسبة للأسماء اللي عم ينحكى عليها كلها معروفة بالاسم إنها معتقلة.
Most of the mentioned names were well known in terms of prisoners of conscience.
محمد صابر سوري من سنوات اعتقل بالإمارات وما حدا بيعرف عنه شيء.
Hamad Sabir is a Syrian who was imprisoned in the Emirates and nobody knows anything about him.
في عنا شخص مشهور وهو من وزارة الدفاع بالحكومة الجديدة، وممكن يكون مطلوب دوليا، ممكن يكون عنده جرائم ما بنعرف. نحن عم نطلب من الإمارات بس تكشف لماذا اعتقلته، وهو قائد جيش الإسلام عصام بويضاني.
There is the Minister of Defense, someone who works at the Ministry of Defense who is imprisoned in the UAE. We do not know if he... okay, I'm just translating. This is not a reflection of of any of my opinions, but we do not know if he has committed or not crimes, but we are demanding at least for the UAE to give information about him.
طبعا هو يحمل الجنسية التركية. الحكومة السورية الجديدة عم تطالب فيه والحكومة التركية عم تطالب فيه وما في أي جواب. نحن إذا عليه أي شيء جريمة نحن أول من اللي يحاسبه ويطالب بمحاسبته، لكن ليش معتقل؟ بدنا جواب على هالسؤال فقط.
He has the Turkish nationality and Syrian nationality. Both governments are asking for his repatriation, but we do not know. But we are just asking, why is he imprisoned in the UAE?
شكرا جزيلا. هذا بس أسئلتنا، إنه المعتقلين عندكم خبرونا عنهم، والموقوفين ليش موقوفين؟ بس قولوا لنا إنه عليه جريمة، عليه نشرة انتربول، عليه كذا. يعني ما هو مجرد وقف بدون كشف عن المصير، يعني نطالب بالكشف عن المصير.
The idea is just to ask from the UAE government what are his fate and whereabouts.
شكرا لكم.
Thank you. So what we're going to do now, and I wanted to say, by the way, that comment I think really highlights the fact that yes, we know some names, but the scale of the arbitrary detention, is potentially much larger than we can know, and maybe the extent of that is something that some of the panelists can speak to. What I want to do now, first of all, very positively, Ahmed Al-Nuaimi has made it from the airport. Ahlan wa sahlan. I'm James. I'm going to give you a breather. You can drink some water. We will answer. I'm going to ask the panelists just to, first of all, just respond to the question we had before, which was about what are the effective tools that can be used, particularly with respect to the UAE's international reputation, and any comments on the second question too. Would anyone like to jump in there? Maybe some quick thoughts so we can give Ahmed a chance to speak.
The tools are, I can say from the perspective of the UK, UK-UAE relations are very strained. And there is a far greater public awareness and understanding of lots of these abuses. It's much more difficult, say, to have that in America because of the distance and the people and the travel. But it's using the commercial activity that they're engaged in as a way to turn around and to elevate their engagement through their visibility in society, if that makes sense at all. The second point, sadly, if they're held under, say, state security laws, which was a topic we didn't come up with earlier, as soon as they're held under state security laws, there's little to no ability there's no guarantee of being able to secure anything. It's then up to it's the responsibility of the states that person is a national of. So if they are Syrian, if they're Turkish, then it's of Damascus and Ankara to be able to secure any form of engagement. That may help them, may not. But there would be a starker contrast between being Sudanese or American and trying to get any form of engagement with a detainee in the UAE, just as an example.
Unless anyone from the panel has anything screamingly urgent to say on top of that, right now I want to turn to Ahmed. Ahmed, we've covered quite a lot of ground, so far in the session, but I think what you may be able to speak to, very powerfully and importantly, is the impact of mass trials on individuals. Not only those who are in the country and in prison, but also people outside the country. Perhaps you can.
I see. Thank you very much, and I would like to just apologize for everyone here for being late, but it is actually the delay of the flight, so for that. They kept us on the airplane for a long time. Sorry for that. And actually giving my testimony here today, it's been 13 years I'm doing that. And the problem that we are suffering more and more every time that we find something new. If I'm talking about the days that I count, now it is 4,793 days since we lost our brother who actually was taken by the government. His family did not know how to find him for a long time, for 9 months. And this is actually, if I'm talking about myself as well, this is my family suffered at that time. And as I told you before, maybe some of you are aware of that my family suffered a lot. They could not reach me, they could not follow me in London for 2 years, and they actually banned from travel. Most of my family, most of my relatives are banned from travel until today. They cannot travel, they cannot go anywhere. So this is one of the suffer. As you know that I lost my son who was banned from travel in 2022 because he was disabled. He could not reach us, he could not be with us. So he died at that time in 2022 when he was around 24 years old. It is actually, if I talk about how I suffer, it is, let me say that all the family suffered with that. And if you remember Ala As-Siddiq, who lost her life in London while she was away from her family, who were kicked out, all of them, because their father has Muhammad As-Siddiq was of the detainees. Now, if I want to talk about what the systematic problem about the UAE government and how they use the law and the court as a weapon against anyone raise their voice calling for democracy or calling for freedom. We know that they even follow us abroad. They put us in the terrorist lists, as you know, and they renew that every time with our even companies. Now we face a problem, even in our normal life, they close our accounts in the bank without showing even the reason of that. The pressure from the government doing the same, it's from the UAE government. and even asking for, trying to claim the citizenship. It's very hard for us. It's very, very hard for us. Until today, I'm now out of my country, 13 years now. I can't have the citizenship because of the pressure of the, the same it's for my family. I'm talking about my children. They suffer with that all the time. So, because of the time, I'm sorry, I'm late, so I will make it short to say that every family of the detainees, they suffer every day with something new. And we know that the family, when the trial in 2013 showed, everyone expected that when the sentences will go, when it's finished, their relatives, they will come back. And they created every while something new, like, as you know, about the advice center. The advice center, where it is actually used the law as a weapon. They created something new called the advice center, where you don't know when is the time that they would say one day that you are good and you are legitimate to go out of the prison. And this in their hand, and there is no limit for that. Until the human rights activists, like my colleagues here and all our brothers and sisters who actually try to get something, they came up after years with a new trial, which is illegal trial, to do the same, actually, with the same case. They brought the same case, and they have a new trial, and my name include that trial, and they send the people for life in a prison, which is it is actually silly, and it is something that we could not imagine one day that would happen in the United Arab Emirates. Now we can see that this government is supported. It's supported, actually, even from the European government, and they don't feel any problem when they do that. They don't face any problem when they do that. And when we go back for the history, we can understand this problem started with a petition that calling for a great value, the democracy and the freedom. And where are the countries that they call for that and they say this is their value? And why the Emirate government can have a pressure upon them to actually tie our life and to put us in trouble every day trouble that we face with the bank, with our job, with everything. And they can't do anything, and they see that. They see that, and they experience that with this government. I don't want to take more time, but it is actually today to understand that the government, they use, I want everyone to know that they use even the law of the international law against the freedom, against the democracy, and you know about how they use the cyber weapon, okay, against Ahmed Mansour is a case. Ahmed Mansour is one of the case that they use the cyber control against him, and we know that the people figure out, many of the activists around the world and the journalists around the world, and even political people, actually, they found that their phone hacked by Pegasus, which controlled by the United Arab Emirates government. So they use this weapon against the people, and they see actually that as their right to understand this is our obligation to stop this problem, because this problem will affect everyone, especially that this problem actually extend abroad till it's reach London and other countries. Thank you very much for giving me this time, even that I'm late. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ahmed. I think that is just the perfect way to close this discussion. I think you've in a way given us all a very powerful reminder of why we were having this discussion, why we were considering. I mean, one of the big themes that's come through, I think the two key themes, and I think Michael put it very well, is the discrepancy between the severity and depth of the human rights crisis in the UAE and the UAE's very positive international relationships and its reputation. And in a way, I think this discussion is highlighting the need to think about creative ways of bridging that gap. A lot of the panelists and others have highlighted this need to seek new tools, to think more creatively through the UN and otherwise. So I think for us collectively to continue this discussion, it is those tools that we maybe need to focus on. And I want to thank everyone involved, the panel. You're all fantastic. Thank you, and thank you for the questions. And again, thank you for the Geneva Press Club for your hosting. So with that, I will
thank you very much.
End the event.
Yeah.